Emily sat at her small desk in the corner of her modest apartment in Brooklyn, her fingers hovering over her laptop keyboard. The city's hustle and bustle echoed faintly outside her window, a reminder that life was continuing around her, despite everything that had just shattered her world. The phone in her hand buzzed again, and she glanced at it, seeing her father's name light up the screen. Dad. She answered the call, her voice steady but betraying a hint of exhaustion. "Hey, sweetie, it's your dad," Greg's voice crackled from the other end, so casual it was almost infuriating. "I wanted to let you know about something." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. "What's going on?" she asked, her mind racing. "I drained your college fund," Greg said, his tone casual as if he were telling her he had picked up groceries. "All $40,000. I needed to pay off some debts." There was a beat of silence, the kind of silence that swelled with disbelief and unspoken rage. Emily's grip tightened on the phone. She couldn't comprehend what she had just heard. The money she had worked so hard for, the money she had saved up through years of scholarships, part-time jobs, and scrimping and saving, was gone. She had been planning on using it to finish her degree and start her life. All of it. Gone. Just like that. "Dad, what do you mean you drained it?" Emily managed to get out, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean exactly what I said," Greg replied, as though explaining something simple. "I had some bills to clear up and I thought you wouldn't mind. I mean, you're a smart girl, right? You'll figure something out. It's just money." Her heart raced, a feeling of betrayal washing over her like ice water. "Just money?" Emily repeated. She could feel her hands shaking as her mind spun. "That money was for my education, my future. You can't just take it, Dad. I worked for years to save that." "Well, what's done is done," Greg said dismissively. "No point in getting upset about it now. You've got a lot going for you. You'll bounce back. You've always been practical." The words stung, and her eyes burned with a mixture of anger and hurt. Practical. That was how he had always seen her. To him, everything had always been about making a deal, about finding the easiest solution. "Good luck with that," she said, her voice dangerously calm. Her father let out a small, oblivious chuckle. "That's my girl. Always keeping your cool. Listen, I've got a meeting with some friends for drinks. We'll talk soon, okay?" And just like that, he hung up, leaving Emily standing in the middle of her apartment, a storm of emotions swirling inside her. He had drained her account, the one she had built from the ground up, and now he was off to live his life without a second thought. He didn't even seem to care that he had destroyed her future. She stared at her phone screen, the words from the call echoing in her mind. He hadn't even apologized. He hadn't even cared enough to explain why he had done it. It was as if he had taken her trust and her future and discarded them without a second glance. Her father's betrayal wasn't new, not really. It was just the latest chapter in a long history of disappointment and failure. He'd always been unreliable, selfish, and quick to make excuses for his behavior. Emily had always forgiven him, always tried to believe that things could be different. But now, with this one act, he had proven to her that he didn't care about her dreams. He only cared about himself. Emily sat down at her desk, staring blankly at the street below. How was she going to fix this? She had 3 months left until graduation, 3 months to find a way to pay for her last semester, 3 months to figure out how to salvage the future she had worked so hard for. Her father had taken everything from her, and now it was up to her to fight back. Her phone buzzed again, and Emily didn't even need to look to know it was from Greg. The text message read, "Don't mention this to your mom or grandmother." No need to worry them. Of course he didn't want them to know, just like he hadn't wanted them to know about his gambling debts, his failed business ventures, or the countless times he had borrowed money and never repaid it. She was just another person he had taken advantage of, just another pawn in his endless game of excuses. Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This wasn't just about money. This was about taking control of her life, standing up for herself, and proving to her father and to herself that she was stronger than he ever gave her credit for. She wouldn't let him derail her dreams. She had worked too hard, and she had come too far to let him destroy everything now. She opened her laptop and started making a list. It was time to take action. Emily sat in her small Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by empty coffee cups and scattered papers. Her fingers flew over the keyboard of her laptop as she accessed her bank account for the 100th time, trying to process the reality of what had just happened. The money was gone. Every penny of the $40,000 she had worked for over the last few years, gone without warning. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she had to stay focused. She couldn't afford to let panic take over. She had just 3 months left until graduation, and now everything she had worked for was hanging by a thread. She had no time to dwell on how unfair it was or how deeply her father's betrayal cut. It was time to act. Emily pulled up the transaction history on her account. There they were, a series of small withdrawals just under the threshold that would raise any immediate alarms. Greg had been careful, methodical even, in how he drained the account. He'd taken out $1,000 here, $2,000 there, always just enough to go unnoticed until it was too late. Each transfer, each withdrawal, a reminder that her father had taken everything from her without a second thought. She scrolled through the history, her mind racing. This wasn't just about money. This was about the dream she had been working toward since she was 17. Her degree in graphic design was supposed to be her ticket to a new life, one where she would prove to herself and everyone else that she was capable of succeeding on her own. Now it was slipping away, and there was only one person to blame: Greg. Her hands shook as she opened a new document, listing every transaction, every dollar Greg had stolen. It wasn't just the money he had taken, it was the trust he had shattered. Emily had always been the one to pick up the pieces when Greg's life fell apart, when he couldn't pay his bills, when he lost his job, when he begged for money. She had always believed that he would eventually come through for her, but this was different. She opened another window on her laptop, pulling up her scholarship details and the records of the part-time jobs she had worked throughout college. She had earned every cent of that fund. She had stayed up late studying, working long hours at her part-time job, cutting back on every unnecessary expense just so she could build the fund that would allow her to finish her degree. She had done everything right, and yet in one careless move, Greg had stolen it all. "Think, Emily," she muttered to herself, trying to focus. She needed a plan. She needed to figure out how to get back on track, how to make sure her father didn't get away with this. Her mind wandered to the conversations she had overheard in the past, those times when Greg had laughed about his gambling debts, his failed businesses, and how he always seemed to find someone to bail him out. She had never imagined it would be her. But now it made sense. She had always been the backup plan, the safety net. To him, her money was just another resource to exploit. Emily's phone buzzed again, breaking her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, and there it was, another text from Greg. "Don't stress about the money. You worry too much. Maybe this is a sign you should take a break from school. I know some people who could help you get a modeling job. Better money than that degree." The words stung. Better money than that degree. She stared at the message, her mind racing. He didn't get it. He never had. To him, education was just a means to an end, a way to make her more useful. He didn't see her dreams, her hard work, or the future she had planned for herself. All he saw was money. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She couldn't let his words get to her, no matter how badly they stung. Emily knew better than anyone that she was more than just a pretty face. She was more than just a backup plan. She was going to finish her degree, no matter what it took. But first, she needed to get control of the situation. Emily stood up and walked over to her desk, pulling out a stack of bank statements. Her mind was already working on the next step. She needed evidence, legal evidence. Greg had always been careful with his actions, but this was still theft. She was going to prove it. She started making calls, first to her bank requesting documentation of the withdrawals, then to the financial aid office at her university, explaining the situation and asking about emergency funding. She didn't have much time. The semester was nearing its end, and without that money, she wouldn't be able to finish her classes. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, emails, and research. Emily started documenting everything. Every text message from her father, every bank statement, every conversation. She needed to make sure she had everything in order before she confronted Greg. She couldn't afford to let him manipulate her again. Her Aunt Claire had always been the one to guide her through tough situations. Claire was a lawyer, and Emily trusted her more than anyone else. After speaking with her aunt about the situation, Emily felt a flicker of hope. Claire had told her to gather everything she could, texts, receipts, emails, and promised to help her figure out the next steps. But Emily knew it wasn't going to be easy. Greg was manipulative, and he would do anything to avoid taking responsibility. She had seen it before. He would lie, deny, and twist the truth until it no longer resembled reality. But Emily wasn't going to let him get away with it this time. As the days passed, Emily grew more and more determined. She began researching legal options, reaching out to law offices for advice. She even started looking into part-time jobs just in case. She wasn't going to let her father's actions dictate her future. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Greg. Emily's stomach churned as she opened it. "Don't tell your mom or grandma about this. You don't want to worry them. You're smart. You'll figure it out." Emily stared at the message. How many times had he said something like this before? How many times had he convinced her that everything would be fine, only to have it all fall apart later? No more. She was done. The next step was clear. She had to confront him, face to face. She had to make him understand that she wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. Emily wasn't just fighting for her money. She was fighting for her future, and she would do whatever it took to make sure her father didn't destroy it. Emily paced back and forth in her small Brooklyn apartment, her mind swirling with thoughts and emotions. She'd spent the last few days gathering evidence, calling lawyers, and figuring out her next steps. But nothing had prepared her for what was about to happen. It was time to confront her father, time to make him understand the consequences of his actions. She couldn't put it off any longer. He had destroyed her trust, taken her money, and now she was going to take back control. The phone buzzed in her hand, and she hesitated before answering. It was him. "Dad," she said, her voice even but tight. "We need to talk." "Sure thing, sweetie," Greg replied, his voice just as casual as it had been on the phone that day. "What's up?" "I know what you did," Emily said, her tone low but filled with fire. "You took my college fund. You drained it, all $40,000. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Greg's voice finally broke the silence, but this time it wasn't as sure. "Look, Emily, I know you're upset." "Upset?" Emily interrupted, her voice rising with frustration. "You think I'm just upset? You took my future, Dad. You took my hard-earned money, and now you expect me to just forgive you because it's no big deal?" Greg sighed, clearly annoyed but trying to maintain his control. "I did what I had to do. You know how things have been. I needed it, and you've got so much going for you. You'll figure it out." Emily's eyes narrowed. This was the same argument he had always used. She had spent years listening to his excuses, always believing that things would get better, that he would somehow change. But she couldn't believe him anymore. "No, Dad, I won't figure it out. You took everything I worked for, everything I built," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You had no right." Another silence stretched between them. Emily's heart raced, but she refused to back down. This wasn't just about money. This was about taking a stand. It was about proving that she wasn't the same girl who had always let him manipulate her. She wasn't going to let him control her future anymore. "Emily," Greg finally said, his tone softer but still full of excuses. "You're my daughter. I didn't want to hurt you, but you've got everything you need. You're smart. You can always get a job, take a loan, you know?" Emily's jaw clenched. "I don't want a loan, and I don't need you to tell me what to do anymore. You've already done enough damage." She slammed the phone down on the desk, feeling the weight of the words she had just spoken. It felt good, almost like a release, but deep down, she knew that the confrontation wasn't over. She still had to make sure that he was held accountable, that he couldn't get away with destroying everything she had worked for. She had already reached out to her Aunt Claire, the lawyer who had always been there for her. Claire was ready to help. She had made it clear that they could pursue legal action, but Emily wasn't sure she was ready to go that far. Not yet, anyway. Emily's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from her father. "Sweetie, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand, but it's just money. Family is more important than money, right?" Emily stared at the screen, her stomach turning. How could he say that? How could he act as though his betrayal wasn't a big deal, as if it were all just some minor inconvenience? He was trying to manipulate her again, trying to guilt trip her into forgiving him. But this time, it wasn't going to work. Emily took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She wasn't going to let him twist the situation anymore. She opened her laptop and began typing. It was time to write the demand letter. She couldn't let this go. She had to take action. Later that evening, Emily sat across from her grandmother, Carol, and her mother, Susan, at the small kitchen table in her apartment. Carol's sharp eyes scanned the papers that Emily had gathered. "You've done well, sweetheart," Carol said, her voice steady with the quiet authority that always calmed Emily's nerves. "Now, we'll make sure he knows exactly what he's dealing with." Emily nodded, grateful for her grandmother's strength. Susan, who had been silent up until now, looked at Emily with a mixture of shock and sorrow. "I never thought he would go this far," Susan whispered, her voice shaking. "He's always been irresponsible, but this is something else." Emily placed her hand over her mother's. "It's not your fault, Mom. He's always been like this. She stopped herself, biting back the tears. "I can't believe I trusted him. I was so stupid to think he would change." Carol leaned forward, her eyes locking with Emily's. "You're not stupid. You were hopeful. But now you're stronger, and this time you're not going to let him destroy you." Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. She had been hopeful for so long. She had always believed in her father, always thought that he would come through when it mattered. But now, she realized, that belief had only held her back. It had kept her in a cycle of disappointment and betrayal. Her grandmother was right. This time, she wasn't going to let Greg's lies define her. She wasn't going to let him tear down everything she had worked for. With her grandmother and mother's support, Emily drafted a formal demand letter. It outlined everything Greg had done, every withdrawal, every lie. It wasn't just a letter. It was a declaration of war. Emily was going to make him pay for what he had done. And if that meant taking legal action, then so be it. The following day, Emily felt the weight of her decision settling on her shoulders as she prepared to send the letter to her father. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. Greg wasn't going to take this lying down. But she had to do this. For herself. For her future. Emily's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from her father. She glanced at the screen, her stomach tightening. It was time to face him again. She answered the call, her voice firm but calm. "Dad, we need to talk." The days following Emily's confrontation with her father passed in a blur of emotions. Every text, every call, and every reminder of Greg's betrayal weighed heavily on her. She had sent the demand letter, a formal declaration of everything he had done, every penny he had stolen. She knew Greg wouldn't take it lightly. He wasn't the type to accept responsibility. He never had been. But this time, Emily wasn't going to let him get away with it. As she sat at her kitchen table in her Brooklyn apartment, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, she could feel the tension in the air. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Greg. It was Claire, her aunt, the lawyer. Emily had spoken to Claire a few times over the past few days, but this call felt different. There was an urgency to it, a sense that things were finally moving. "Emily, I've got some news." Claire's voice came through the phone, steady but serious. "We've got a court date." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "A court date? For what?" "Your father has been served," Claire explained. "He's refusing to pay back the money, and he's denying any wrongdoing. We're moving forward with a lawsuit, and we've got a date set for his hearing." The weight of those words hit Emily like a ton of bricks. A lawsuit. It wasn't something she had ever thought she'd have to do, but here she was. She had no choice. She couldn't let Greg get away with stealing her future, with wrecking everything she had worked for. "How soon?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly. She had been preparing herself for this moment, but hearing it out loud made everything feel real. "It's set for 2 weeks from now. I'll be there with you every step of the way, Emily. You're not alone in this." "Thank you, Claire," Emily said softly, her voice thick with emotion. I just want this to be over." "I know," Claire replied, her tone softer now. "But this is the only way forward. We'll make sure he's held accountable." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Emily and Claire worked together to gather more evidence, going through all of the documents and texts Emily had saved. They collected every transaction detail, every screenshot of Greg's messages, and every piece of evidence that would help them make their case. Emily spent long hours in her apartment, poring over every document, determined to make sure her father couldn't twist the truth again. Greg's responses were predictable. He called Emily a few times, trying to manipulate her back into forgiving him. He insisted that it was just money and that family was more important. "Come on, sweetie," he would say. "You're overreacting. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Don't let this ruin us. We're family." But Emily saw through it all. This wasn't about family. It never had been. This was about control. Greg had always treated her like a backup plan, a way to bail him out of his own messes. But she wasn't going to be his crutch anymore. She wasn't going to let him use her and manipulate her for his own gain. He even tried to turn the rest of the family against her. He reached out to her mother, Susan, trying to convince her that Emily was overreacting, that this wasn't a big deal. He played the victim, as he always did. "I don't know why Emily is doing this, Susan," Greg said in one of his many phone calls to her mother. "It's just money. I'm her father. Why is she treating me like this?" Susan didn't know what to say at first. She had always been caught in the middle between her daughter and her ex-husband, but this time there was no middle ground. Emily was right. Greg had betrayed them both. "Greg," Susan said, her voice steady but firm, "you've taken everything from Emily. You've taken her money, her trust, and now you want to turn it all around and make her feel guilty? She's right to do this. You've crossed a line." There was silence on the other end of the line before Greg finally responded. "I don't need this. You don't know what it's like out here. I've got my own problems." "You've always had your own problems, Greg," Susan replied, her voice shaking with anger. "But this time, you're not going to use your problems to destroy her." After that, the calls from Greg stopped. Emily didn't hear from him again until a few days later, when she received another text from him. "Sweetie, please, let's not make this a bigger deal than it is. I'm your father. You owe me more respect than this." Emily stared at the text, her hands trembling. It was the same manipulation, the same guilt tripping. But she wasn't going to fall for it anymore. She deleted the message without replying and turned her attention back to the task at hand. She had a court case to prepare for, and she wasn't going to let her father's lies and manipulations stand in her way. 2 weeks later, the day of the court hearing arrived. Emily stood outside the courtroom with Claire, her heart racing in her chest. The building was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the warmth of her grandmother's kitchen where she had been so supported. She was nervous, unsure of what to expect, but deep down, she knew this was the right thing to do. She couldn't let Greg get away with it. She had to see this through. "Remember," Claire said, her hand on Emily's shoulder, "we've got this. We have the evidence. You're stronger than you think." Emily nodded, grateful for her aunt's support. As they walked into the courtroom, her eyes fell on her father. He was sitting at the front looking disheveled and nervous. He hadn't bothered to clean up his appearance, not that it mattered to him. Emily's anger flared, but she quickly squashed it down. Today wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. As the case was presented, Emily felt a strange sense of detachment. She had done the right thing, but hearing the details of Greg's betrayal laid bare in front of the judge and the court made her stomach churn. The evidence was undeniable, and Emily could see the disbelief in the judge's eyes as Greg tried to explain himself. Greg's defense was weak, filled with excuses and half-truths. He claimed he had used the money to pay off debts, but there was no proof of that. Emily's evidence was solid, and the judge saw through Greg's attempts to manipulate the situation. The judge ruled in Emily's favor. Greg was ordered to repay the money with interest and was also required to undergo financial counseling. Emily couldn't believe it. She had won. It wasn't just the money. It was the recognition that her father's betrayal wouldn't define her. She was free. The days following the court ruling felt like a blur to Emily. She had won, but the victory wasn't as sweet as she had imagined. The weight of everything that had happened still pressed down on her chest, and though she had gotten justice, it didn't change the fact that her father had betrayed her in a way that left scars deeper than just the stolen money. Emily spent the next few weeks tied up in legal formalities, making sure the repayment plan was set in motion, arranging for the money to be returned with interest, and finally breathing a sigh of relief that Greg was being held accountable. But despite the win, there was a lingering emptiness inside her. She had spent so many years hoping that her father would change, that he would come through for her in the end. Instead, she had been forced to fight him for what was rightfully hers. Sitting at her desk, Emily looked out the window at the bustling streets of Brooklyn. The world outside was moving forward just as it always did, but for Emily, everything had changed. She had grown stronger in ways she never thought possible. She had faced her demons head-on and come out the other side not just a survivor, but a victor. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her mother, Susan. "You did it, Em. I'm so proud of you." A warm smile spread across Emily's face as she typed her reply. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you." Her phone buzzed again. This time it was from Claire, her aunt. "I know it's been a long road, but you've done it. Your future is in your hands now." The words hit her like a wave. Her future. It was true. For the first time in her life, she truly understood what that meant. She wasn't just defined by her father's mistakes or her past. She was her own person, capable of making her own decisions, of building the life she had always dreamed of. And for the first time, it felt like the world was finally on her side. The following week, Emily moved into her new apartment in Manhattan. It wasn't much, just a small studio in a quiet neighborhood, but it was hers. The city was vibrant, alive, a constant reminder that the world was full of opportunity. Emily had always dreamed of living here, and now she was. The road had been hard, but she had made it. As she unpacked the last of her boxes, a sense of calm settled over her. She was free. She wasn't tied to her father's mistakes anymore. She wasn't bound by the weight of his lies and manipulations. She had earned this. Emily's phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a call. She glanced at the screen and saw the name, her grandmother, Carol. "Hi, Grandma," Emily said, picking up the phone and smiling. "Hey, sweetheart. How are you doing?" Carol's voice was warm, but Emily could hear the underlying concern. I'm doing good. Really good, actually. Just moved into my new place. That's wonderful. I knew you'd get there. I'm so proud of you, Emily. Her grandmother's words were a balm to Emily's soul. Thanks, Grandma. I couldn't have done it without you. You've always believed in me. I've always known you were capable of anything, Carol said softly. You've had to face a lot, but look at you now. You're stronger than ever. Emily felt her heart swell with gratitude. I don't think I could have done it without you, too. You've been there for me more than anyone. Carol chuckled. I only gave you the push you needed. You've always had it in you, sweetheart, and now it's time for you to take the world by storm. You've got a bright future ahead. Emily's smile faded slightly as a thought crossed her mind. Yeah, but it's still hard to forgive him. I thought he would be different. I thought maybe, just maybe, he would come through for me. Carol's voice grew serious. I know, Emily, I know how much you wanted him to change, but you can't keep waiting for someone who refuses to change. You did what you had to do, and now it's time for you to live your life. Emily nodded, even though Carol couldn't see her. The truth was hard to swallow, but she knew it was the only way forward. She had spent so many years hoping that her father would finally change, that he would finally be the father she had always wanted. But the reality was, he had never been that man. And now, it was time for her to stop waiting. I'll be okay, Grandma, Emily said, her voice steady. I'm finally taking control of my life. That's my girl, Carol said with pride. Now go and show the world just what you're made of. 2 days later, Emily received a call from her new employer, a top design firm she had applied to months earlier. They had reviewed her portfolio and were impressed with her work. They wanted to offer her a permanent position. The news was like a dream come true, but it didn't come without its weight. She sat in her new apartment, phone in hand, trying to process the offer. It was the job she had always dreamed of, but it came with a sense of finality. This was her chance to start over completely, to build the career she had worked so hard for. But more than that, it was her opportunity to move forward, to put her past behind her once and for all. The voice on the other end of the phone was warm and welcoming. Emily, we're very excited to have you on board. We think you'll be a great fit for the team. We'd like to offer you the position, starting next month. Emily's heart raced as she processed the words. I'm honored, she replied, her voice full of conviction. I accept. After she hung up, Emily sat back on the couch, a feeling of accomplishment washing over her. She had made it. She had faced the worst thing that could happen, and she had come out stronger. No more waiting, no more hoping for things to get better on their own. She was finally taking control. Later that week, Emily stood in front of her mirror, getting ready for her first day at the design firm. She was dressed in a sleek black dress, her hair styled just the way she liked it. She looked every bit the professional, the woman she had always dreamed of becoming. But as she looked at her reflection, she realized something important. The woman staring back at her wasn't just the person who had worked so hard for this career. She was also the woman who had fought through betrayal, who had stood up for herself when it mattered most. She wasn't just a product of her achievements. She was a product of everything she had overcome. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was a message from her mother. I'm so proud of you, Emily. You did it. You've proven that nothing can hold you back. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she read the message. She had done it. She had built a life for herself, one that was entirely her own. She wasn't defined by her father's mistakes anymore. She was defined by her strength, her resilience, and her ability to move forward. She took a deep breath and smiled at her reflection. It was time to take on the world.